Order. Order. I'll call Alistair Carmichael to move the motion, and I will call the Minister to respond. There will not be an opportunity for the member in charge to wind up, as is the convention, for 30-minute debates. Alistair Carmichael.
Thank you very much, Mr Efford, and I beg to move that the House has considered the matter of maritime safety breaches within the exclusive economic zone. It's a pleasure as ever to serve with you in the chair, and I welcome almost the Minister to his place in the chamber. The Minister knows that I hold him in high regard as a very effective and diligent Minister, so I hope he won't take it amiss if I say that I was a little bit disappointed to hear I wasn't getting a reply from the Attorney-General or one of her staff. In fact, when I think about it, that change kind of highlights one of the problems that we're dealing with here, and it is that this is an issue in respect of which many government departments have an interest, but nobody actually has overall responsibility. So I hope that one thing we might take away from this debate today is a determination actually to make sure that somebody does take charge of this. Essentially, what I want to bring to the House's attention today is a matter that arises from an ongoing conflict between fishing boats that operate static gear and those that operate mixed gear. Mobile gear. Now, there must be better ways of, in fact, there can only be better ways of resolving these conflicts and tensions than the ones that I'm about to describe for the House. But there are two particular incidents which are well documented, and I want to place on the record here today for the benefit of the House and for the Minister's consideration. The first of these took place on the 11th of June 2020, involving the Shetland registered whitefish boat Alison Kay. Skippered by James Anderson, they were fishing 30 nautical miles to the west of Shetland. Mr Anderson describes what the roots of what was about to happen thus. He said, the incident occurred on the 11th of June, and when the vessel in question shot his gear, that's the Pizorsa DOS, a Spanish-owned but German-registered vessel, it shot his gear in the area. He knew we were fishing. He chose to put his gear at risk. What he decided to do was to shoot nets, that's gill nets, of quite industrial magnitude. He decided to do was to shoot nets in an area known to be used by trawlers, and then subsequently tell the trawlers that they can't fish here now because his gear is now there. This is simply unacceptable terms for us, and we have no intention of moving away when we have every right to continue fishing. This is an area of sea fished for decades, if not centuries, by Shetland fishermen, Mr Efford, so you can understand Mr Anderson's strength of feeling here. What happened then, though, however, was that the skipper of the Pizorsa DOS proceeded to tow a rope tied to a float across the bow. It was a clear attempt to foul the Alison Kay's propeller or steering gear. It was an act of the most incredible recklessness for which there can be no excuse. It could have led to injury or death or loss of either or both of the boats. And of course it was avoided simply because the skipper of the Alison Kay took avoiding action. The Pizorsa DOS is a Spanish-registered, Spanish-owned gillnetter that is flagged in Germany through the Schleswig-Holstein-based Seamar company. The MCA investigated the incident, or were made aware of it at least, but actually declined to investigate because they said it happened outside the 12-mile limit, and the 12-mile limit is the extent of their jurisdiction. So this takes us into that area of sea between the 12-mile limit and the extent of the 200-mile exclusive economic zone, the EEZ. Notwithstanding their describing it as being extremely concerning and saying that the consequences could have been extremely serious, it was declared that it was something, the responsibility for which lay with the German investigating authorities, because that was where the Pizorsa DOS was registered. Germany was the flag state. We pursued some of this in correspondence with the German authorities, but bluntly, they were not interested. Although they are the flag state, why would they be? This is an incident that happened involving a conflict between a Spanish vessel and a Scottish vessel in water hundreds of miles away from Germany, from the closest point of German waters. So I don't believe when the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, which I think is the governing statute here, was entered into, that this sort of behaviour was ever anticipated. But this is the reality with which fishermen in Shetland and other parts of the United Kingdom are now having to deal. Of course, yes.
This forward. I represent, as the Minister knows, a constituency of Strangford, which has a very large fishing fleet, and what the Right Honourable Gentleman has brought forward is something that's so vitally important. But does the member not agree, and he's outlined very clearly the two incidents, that the sovereign rights that exist for our fishing fleet mean that the standards we set in that zone apply to every fishing vessel, not just those British ones, and that we must enforce on any vessel the appropriate safety measures rigorously and authoritatively with extended powers if warranted by the MCA? In other words, they're all subject to the same laws.
Yes, that is actually something with which I have no difficulty agreeing. The honourable gentleman will not be surprised to hear. And in fact, they are all subject to the same laws. The difficulty comes when you try to enforce them. And in fact, the Irish government have taken a rather more novel and, shall we say, direct approach, which I think from which there are some lessons that we could probably learn. The former Fisheries Minister and the now Attorney General actually convened a Zoom call for me, which had, if not exactly a cast of thousands in it, had at least a dozen people on it, who one by one explained why they understood the seriousness of the situation, but in fact it was always somebody else's problem. And it was agreed at the end of that call that there would be further consideration and action would be taken, but effectively, I'm afraid to say, years later, we've heard nothing since. It seems to just go from government department to department to department, and it's always too difficult for somebody to deal with. But for my constituents, for the fishermen working in Shetland and Shetland waters, it continues to be a problem. And on the 16th of October last year, the Lerwick registered whitefish boat, the Defiant, was working 18 miles east of Unst, again within the area of water between 12 and 200 miles, skippered on that day by Magnus Poulsen. And this time, a similar incident, but involving a longliner, a Spanish-owned but French-registered boat, the Antonio Maria. Mr. Poulsen established where the long lines were and that he could operate safely without coming into conflict with the static gear. But 15 minutes later, the skipper of the Antonio Maria altered his course onto a direct collision course with the Defiant. It came dangerously close to the port side of the Defiant, and the crew of the Defiant saw two crewmen appear on the Antonio Maria, again one threw a rope into water, again we presume designed to foul the propeller. Mr. Poulsen explained, due to the close proximity and the endangered safety of our boat, I had no choice but to begin hauling back our gear to make room. Just a few weeks ago in Lerwick, I met the other skipper of the Defiant, Robbie Jimison, and he showed me, in fact, in the wheelhouse of the Defiant, the screen grab of the course that he had plotted, and they also showed where the long lines had been laid by the Antonio Maria, and it was clear that the course that he was going to tow his gear through was not actually going to come into conflict with the long lines that had been set by the Antonio Maria. They would have moved somewhere to the south of them. I raised this with the Fisheries Minister on the 19th of October. He described it as outrageous behaviour, and he said, I will certainly raise it with my ministerial colleagues. But again, we've heard precious little since. Everybody knows that this is mad, reckless, dangerous behaviour, but somehow or another, nobody ever seems to have an answer to how to stop it. The Maritime Coast Guard Agency has forwarded their report to the French authorities for investigation. That was the incident happened in October. We're now well into April, and we've had no response to date. The Shetland Fishermen's Association has asked for the opportunity to have sight of what was sent by the MCA to the French authorities. They've been told they can't have that. I wonder if the Minister might actually raise this again with the MCA, because I don't see really what the MCA would have to lose by publishing that report. And frankly, it would go a long way to restoring some trust and confidence between the fishing fleet and the MCA. As I said earlier, Mr. Efford, essentially the difficulty here lies in the terms of UNCLOS, the decision to vest authority for investigation and prosecution with the flag state. I don't believe that this was something that was ever envisaged at the time of UNCLOS being agreed, but it is now the reality with which my constituents have to live and have to deal. And essentially, this is going to keep happening unless and until it's stopped. And it can only stop, as I see it, in one of two ways. There either has to be meaningful action to deal with this, or else we wait until there is a fatality, boat goes down, and life is lost. And when that happens, all the people who come up with the really good, worthy, complicated reasons as to why it's somebody else's responsibility today, I'm afraid will be left looking pretty shamefaced and embarrassed. And I don't want any one of them ever to turn around and say, I wish somebody had told us about this. They have been well warned by me today and on many other previous occasions. So what can we do? I think there are a few quick and easy wins that could be done here. The Executive Officer of the Shetland Fishermen's Association, shortly after the Antonio Maria incident, said that there was a need for a streamlined process of reporting, an individual designated within the MCA to receive reports, because this sort of thing happens, nobody wants to know about it, and fishermen get pushed from pillar to post. A hotline, a dedicated number that skippers can phone to report an incident to this place, because the sooner that some sort of action is able to be taken, the likelier it is that that action will then be effective. And we'd like to see our government pursuing this with just a bit more vigour than they have done. So we go through the motions, we tick the boxes, we write the report, we send it off to the German authorities, the French authorities, whoever it's going to be, and then what happens? This is something, and I would call on the Minister to undertake this is something he could do, to raise this at a diplomatic or at a ministerial level with his opposite numbers where these incidents happen, so that the prosecuting authorities in these other flag states understand that this is something that we see as being important. I also think we could see much better cooperation between the MCA, which is a department or an agency rather responsible to the Department for Transport here, and Marine Scotland, responsible for the fisheries management issues and fishing protection in Scotland. They're the people who have boats in the water, who would be able to attend incidents like this and gather the necessary evidence. The other thing is, these boats operate, as all our boats do, and this comes to the point from the Honourable Member from Strangford, they operate there under licence. Surely it could be a condition of licence that if you're going to fish in our waters, then you do it in a way that is safe and responsible, and when we then we might not be able to prosecute them for safety breaches, but we could actually take action to remove their licences. And that, I think, is something that would concentrate the mind. It's worth comparing the treatment of the Presorsa DOS in 2020 in Scottish waters and British waters with the treatment that it received in Irish waters. The Skipper's website from January 20th, 23 describes what happened to the Presorsa DOS after it was detained by the Irish Naval Services for breaches of EU fishing regulations in Irish waters. The skipper, Juan Pablo Docal Rubido, was brought before a special sitting of Bandon District Court following the detention of the Pozorza Dos for alleged fishing offences in Irish waters. Mr Rubido, whose vessel is Spanish-owned and fishes out of La Coruña, but is currently detained in Castletown Bear, was charged with a total of 12 fishing offences on various dates between 5th and 24th January, fishing within the exclusive fishing limits of the state. Charged with 2 logbook offences of failing to record the proper depth that his vessel was fishing at and with failing to record the proper soak times or times that he allowed his nets to stay in water while fishing with within Irish exclusive fishing limits. Charged with a total of 9 separate offences of allowing his nets to exceed the permitted soak times of 72 hours allowed for the gear while fishing within the exclusive fishing limits of the state, contrary to Section 14 of the Sea Fisheries and Maritime Jurisdiction Act. The best part, though, is still to come. The boat was detained. It was kept in quayside as a consequence of action taken to seize the boat by the Irish authorities. And the skipper himself was allowed bail on production of a bond of £5,000. The period for which the extension for the detention was to be permitted actually was extended on the application of the Irish government, because these trawlers, these massive gill netters, Mr. Efford, are big businesses, and they're only making money when they're out at sea. So it's that old American saying that if you get them by their reproductive organs, then their hearts and minds will follow. And that really, I think, it characterises the way in which these people have to be tackled. Granting bail, the presiding judge, Colm Roberts, granted bail on Mr Rubido's own bond of £5,000, and he said, "We have to make sure people realise how serious these matters are." Well, amen to that, because it seems to me that we're dealing here with an industry which is probably the most dangerous way of making a living. Everybody knows that when fishermen go to sea, they very often put their lives at risk. And that's something that the fishermen themselves know better than anybody else. And they understand that this is a contest that sets man against nature and the elements of nature. That's the risk that is acceptable and understood. But actually, setting man against man in a way like this is not something that can be understood or excused. We have an exclusive economic zone. I would suggest to the Minister and his colleagues that it's about time that we understood what it means to be exclusive and to exclude those who will not use it responsibly.
The House has considered maritime safety breaches within the exclusive economic zone. Minister.
Thank you, and I want to congratulate my honourable friend for securing this very, very important debate, which touches upon key matters that this country should be very conscious of and should be very anxious to ensure is observed in the right way. And he put his case and the case of his constituents in his customary, robust and very, very fair tone. As he knows, I know Shetland pretty well, having visited only last summer. I nearly knew it very much better because Sunborough Airport was shut when I was attempting to leave. But I'm also acutely conscious that the waters around Shetland are amongst the most dangerous in the world, and that, as he rightly puts it, this is fundamentally about safety first and foremost. And we can have an argument about sovereignty, we can have an argument about consequences, an argument about the fiscal intentions of certain people in fishing in a particular way. But the most important thing is the safety element, because he is right to make the case that this is a dangerous profession. And I should put on record my thanks to our fishing fleet and the contribution they make to the UK economy. I believe it is the case that in 2022, for example, UK vessels landed 640,000 tonnes of sea fish into the UK and abroad with a value over £1 billion, and that we remember, with National Fishing Remembrance Day on the 12th of May coming up, those who have lost their lives while working in fishing in the UK. but also this is an opportunity to raise awareness of the dangers and how we can tackle it. In this regard, I'm conscious that there have been a number of incidents, and certainly the MCA are aware of 3 such incidents reported in the last 5 years. He outlined 2 in particular, the one on the 11th of June 2020, and obviously more recently what took place on the 16th of October of last year, when the actions of the French-registered Antonio Maria were clearly very serious in respect of what happened to the Defiant, a UK-registered and Shetland-registered vessel, approximately 16 miles off the northeast coast of Shetland. I'm aware of the footage and the commentary since then, and I'm aware of the very serious potential consequences, loss of power at sea, so far from shore, with the weather and its ability to change as easily as it is, particularly in October, is not something that should be in any way undermined. I want to put on my record my utter condemnation of the actions of the crew of the Antonio Maria, but also the other ships that have been involved in this, because that conduct is not conduct that they would wish to be seen upon themselves. And without being too hackneyed about this, everybody is in the same boat in this respect. And it is utterly important that we try and ensure that there is a change of behaviour. Now, the mechanics of that, as he knows very, very well, with the implications of UNCLOS, are very, very difficult. And there is a difference, is there not, between the law that applies up to 12 miles and the very draconian actions that can be taken when something is within UK waters, in an area that we control and that we have legal jurisdiction over, and what can happen outside the 12 nautical miles. Now, he clearly knows, as he set out as well, that there was a report of the most recent incident by the MCA, and I put on record their efforts, and my thanks for their efforts. But I have to say, I think we need to do more. And so I don't have a lot of time, but I want to address some of the key asks he has. The first key ask is clearly that there should be sight of the letter that was written in October. Of course, that can happen. I'm surprised it hasn't. It will happen within a matter of weeks. Secondly, and that will obviously be shared with the Shetland Fisheries Association and with himself. Secondly, he asked for a designated person going forward. I think there's a bit of devil in the detail, but the fundamental is that I'm going to make sure that there is a designated individual who is the nominated person for receipt. I think active phone lines and things like that are more complicated to establish, but I take the point on board, bear with me, and I will allow the organisation to go away and think about how they're going to do that, because not least that there is needs to be a link up with in terms of actions and consequences if disasters do occur, and all organisations need to be kept informed. But I certainly would totally endorse and will give instruction that a designated person, if that hasn't happened thus far, it definitely is going to happen going forward. The third thing that he raised was in respect of the MCA working more closely with Marine Scotland. I don't have any specific comment on that in my papers. I'm sure it does already, but I'm going to make very sure that they're going to meet within the next month and that there is going to be an ongoing dialogue and an ongoing discussion with all devolved nations and all devolved organisations to make sure that we are utterly joined up and utterly as one going forward. In respect of the licence, I take that point on board. That is something that clearly we need to go away and think about how we can try and do something with that. The key point I would respectfully suggest as well is that there is always a danger when you have an arm's length body which isn't effectively controlled by government, that government then says, well, we actually want to try and run it ourselves, all right? And every minister has such arm's length bodies. I had many at the Department of Work and Pensions. I have them at the Department of Transport. And it is difficult to say, as my dad used to say, you don't buy a dog and bark yourself. You've got to be in a position to let them get on with it. But I am going to strongly invite them to do 2 key things, which is, first of all, to have a proper sit-down with the Fisheries Minister. And the Fisheries Minister then needs, in my humble opinion, to sit down with the individual ministers and to start with correspondence, but then to do a sit-down to ensure that there is a proper understanding that it is in all of our interests that these incidents do not happen, and that there is no benefit whatsoever, and that if this is allowed to take place off the shores of Shetland, eventually there is going to be a serious accident here, and lives can potentially be lost. Loss of propulsion out in the ocean, far from land, in circumstances where it's October, is just not acceptable in any way whatsoever, however fired up everybody is. So I do believe that the Fisheries Minister needs to take that forward. I'm going to do my bit as well to raise this with the FCDO so that they have an understanding of what is going forward. He talks about, and we all know, that the long-term reform is reform of the United Nations laws of the sea. That is difficult, and that clearly is difficult, but it is also not impossible, because he is right, and this is the key point I want to try and finish on, which is, he is right, is he not, that so many of the institutions that we all set up as individual countries post-war, whether it is the UN and its approach to various things, whether it is the G5, G7, whatever it is, whether it is the various immigration rules and regulations that we all abide by. These are all institutions that are struggling to deal with the modern world and with the modern pressures that we are all having. And the challenge for all governments going forward is to try and adapt and improve those. And I take solace, because he will know, without getting into the devil to the detail, but the law of the sea only became first agreed in 1956. It then got basically upgraded and improved in 1960, in 1973, and in 1982. So this can be done. And having better penalties and more draconian action for consequences, of which they do exist, there's clearly stuff going on in places like South China and the Philippines as well, is got to be the right way ahead. So my assurance to him is that we will take that on board. It is clearly going to be a work in progress for successive governments, but we as a government take the view that that process should start now, and I give that assurance to him and his constituents. I want to finish by thanking him for raising this, asking for the forbearance and understanding of his community, who I know are very, very tough and hardy folk, and who are doing an amazing job for both the islands, but also for this country. And we should be extraordinarily thankful for their service, for their contribution to the economy, and the delicious fish they are putting onto our tables. But we will do what we can to ensure that there is a better system going forward, because frankly, it is in all our interests.
The question is that the House has considered maritime safety breaches within the exclusive economic zone. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order. The sitting is suspended until 2:30.
The proceeding has ended. The proceeding has ended. The proceeding has ended.